Hi there everyone, welcome to the Goulburn Community Energy Co-operative webinar. My name is Peter Fraser, I'm the President of Community Energy for Goulburn and I'm a Director of the Co-operative. Just some quick little housekeeping things first up. The event will go for an hour, including questions. An info pack has been emailed to you this afternoon, a couple of hours ago. If you didn't receive that, please email us and let us know that you did not receive the info pack. To ask questions at any time, just use the live chat box on your screen. There will be opportunities for questions to be answered at the end of the presentation, and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. Any questions that we can't answer tonight, please email us at hello@goulburnsolarfarm.com.au. hello@goulburnsolarfarm.com.au. This region in Australia was a meeting place for several Indigenous groups from the southern tablelands and the south coast. At our first public meeting last week, Opal O'Neill, the President of the Pijar Aboriginal Land Council, which is based in Goulburn, welcomed us to the place. Today, I wish to acknowledge the custodians of the land on which we are currently meeting and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just to explain how we're going to run things, tonight there are three parts to the program. There's just a general introduction, commencing with a video. Then there'll be some technical information from the project developer. And then there'll be some financial information on investing from our treasurer. Then we'll follow with a Q&A section where any of the speakers will try to answer your questions. Then further information, questions and opportunity to become a member and invest in you'll be told about that through the meeting. So what we're going to start with is a video that features John Hewson. Dr. Hewson has been a tireless advocate for clean energy and an inspiration to many. And he's been a supporter of our project right from its inception in 2015.
If you look at what's happened in our political process over the last couple of decades, both sides just scoring points on each other in what we call the climate wars, scoring points, shifting blame, basically doing nothing. We haven't got an energy policy. And so I've been a strong supporter through that period of other responses. And you've seen households respond, putting solar panels on their roofs, you've seen businesses respond, but the big thing is community movements. And in that context, Goulburn stood out as a shining example of what you can do as a community. You come together to get a community solar project off the ground. So I thought it needed as much support as I could give it. Well, I think communities are moving basically because they don't see much happening at the national level. There's no leadership, there's no genuine commitment to a low carbon Australia, say by the middle of this century. But most people that you'd speak to, and every poll and survey I've seen in the last many years, has been in favour of a transition to a low carbon Australia, to a more reliance on renewable energy, for example, more electric vehicles and so on. Communities said, well, what can we do when government's not doing it? So the leadership's actually coming from local government levels. I mean, a lot of local governments have signed up on commitments to a climate emergency or to net zero emissions by 2050 and so on. And they're looking for ways to bring this about. An obvious way in terms of a community like Goulburn with pretty good sunshine is a solar farm. communities should be doing more, and there's a lot in it for the community. Not just community pride, but it gives members of the community a chance to invest in the project, a chance to be part owners of the project and get the benefits of maybe a return as well as lower carbon emissions and some carbon credits, as we say. You know, these are all things that will come to people who would participate. Goulburn's still one of the leading examples of community solar in the country. We should make a transition to a low carbon economy, a low carbon society. We should all be part of that process, and that will bring about an enormous transformation. Clean energy makes a hell of a lot of sense. Look, we won't know ourselves when we get there. Our grandkids will benefit. But if we keep doing what we're doing, shoving the problem down the road to them, it's going to be so much harder and so much more difficult and disruptive for them to actually have to respond. We have a moral responsibility, apart from anything else, to make this transition, and everyone's part of it. I mean, everyone's got a role to play. Households, business, governments, civil society, all our institutions, they've all got a role to play. But, you know, that's why community projects are important. They're leading when governments are laggards.
You too can be part of this transformation. If you live in the Southern Tablelands, you have the opportunity to invest in this renewable energy project and become an active member of the Community Energy for Goulburn Co-operative. Just go to our website and download the offer information statement and the application. We'd love you to be involved in this project. Over the last 4 years, I've been repeatedly asked 3 key questions. Why build a solar farm? Is it a safe investment? What kind of returns might be possible for an investor? And I want to quickly go through those 3 questions. The first one is, why are we doing this? Well, John Hewson says that all in the video you've just watched. There really is a climate emergency, and governments are not moving anywhere near fast enough to do something about it. We're being left in the lurch, and our kids and grandkids are the ones who are going to cop the consequences. The overwhelming action that should be taken right now is to get out of fossil fuels. So in the face of this government inaction, some of us have decided to take matters into our own hands. We wanted to show how community-owned renewable projects can prosper, just like they've been doing in Europe and the USA for more than 20 years. That's why. How? Well, in 2015, the Goulburn Group set up a subcommittee to test the feasibility of building this solar farm. Once that was confirmed, Community Energy for Goulburn was incorporated as a separate entity. And just recently, the co-op was set up specifically to build this project. We've now progressed the planning. We've appointed a developer to build the farm and have obtained a large grant from the New South Wales government to add a battery. We will shortly begin site preparations, and construction will begin early in the new year. The long and the short of it is, we're now pretty much ready to go. The second question, is it a safe investment? By July next year, there'll be around 4,000 solar panels and a large-scale battery sitting on our site on Bridge Street on the edge of Goulburn. It will start generating electricity, and it will continue to do so for 25 to 30 years, maybe more. All of us need 3 basic things: shelter, food, and energy. We will give up all other consumables unless these 3 essentials are met. Sometimes we'll even give up food in order to keep warm. So energy is one of our most basic requirements, and our solar farm will generate the equivalent of powering up to 500 homes. Energy is one of those industries that is considered essential. We are going to produce energy. Over those 25 to 30 years, over the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be a coal-fired generator in the Hunter Valley will close up shop. That'll create a supply problem for the market and will boost demand for more renewable energy. As further plants close over the next 20 to 30 years, our solar farm will continue to supply electricity with zero energy input costs. There'll be no coal to mine, no gas to pump, just clean, free energy from the sun. But wait, there's even more. The New South Wales government has stumped up half the equity in the project. That means that for every dollar you invest, you are effectively doubling your equity in the project. That's a pretty good deal in anyone's assessment. So in our view, this is a safe investment, as almost anything else apart from government bonds. Instead of bricks and mortar, there's sticks and solar, sitting there generating revenue with no interruptions, no rental clients to find every 6 months, very low maintenance, no downtime, even when it's cloudy, thanks to the battery. We think it's a very safe investment. And thirdly, what kind of return would I get on my investment? Well, for us, there are two kinds of return. There's financial and there's ethical. In terms of an ethical return on investment, the returns are as good as they get. When you hit that switch, there's now a real alternative. Renewable energy is part of the mix to put the brakes on global warming. And that's an investment for the future of this planet, for future generations, and for the rest of the living creatures on this earth. But in a more prosaic term, I guess most of you want to know something about the financial returns. So, the question is, can we predict the future? Not likely. 2 weeks ago, even Gladys Berejiklian probably didn't expect her private affairs would be splashed all over the papers. Few predicted the coronavirus and its impact on the economy just 12 months ago. So we can't tell you what's going to happen in the future. But there are three variables over which we have no control. We have no control over the price of energy in the future. We have no control over the state of the economy. And we have no control over the weather. But we've taken account of all these variables in our business model. And while we can't tell you what return on investment will be achieved, we can provide some pointers. Firstly, overseas experience with community energy projects points to a return of somewhere between 4 and 8%. And they've been doing it for a long time. But secondly, the business model which we submitted to the New South Wales government for the grant application and approved by them was detailed and extensive. So if you look at this slide, you can see that with the assumptions made regarding revenue and operating expenses and projecting a 5% return on investment, at the end of 10 years there will be a cash surplus of over $850,000. This could be used to replace most, if not all, the panels after 10 years, despite the fact that we have an operating guarantee of 20 years. So you see the orange line, that's a projection from the costs and the revenue that shows that at the end of those 10 years, there'll be a significant cash surplus. Even though revenue will decline slightly because the panels lose some of their efficiency, even with a return of 5%, we will have a big cash surplus. And then adding a battery makes the business model even more secure. A battery lets us sell our energy when the price is high. And as the market becomes more sophisticated, the battery will likely be used to stabilise the grid, and that may well generate additional revenue, as you've seen with the Tesla battery in South Australia. So we can generate the electricity in the middle of the day, store it in the battery, sell it on the market late in the afternoon when the prices are much better, and that will increase and improve our revenue model. So talking about the battery segues nicely introducing our next speaker, who will be able to explain in more detail how the battery will benefit the project. But before I introduce Jonathan from Como Energy, our Vice President Ed Suttle is going to extol yet one more benefit of investing in our project. Here's Ed.
Good evening, everybody. 4 or 5 years ago when we started this project, we sat down and really tried to identify what are we doing, why are we doing it, and who is it for. And in the end, we identified 4 principles, one of which is to equitably share the benefits of our project with the whole community. Now, a subset of that, in other words, a way to achieve that, was to create a community fund to facilitate the equitable sharing of the benefits of all projects. So we have founded and established the community fund and established a joint venture with Anglicare, who will assist run it and pass on some of the profits to the less advantaged people within the Goulburn region. The manager of Anglicare, the local manager Tony Ray, said this: "The families we work with are struggling financially, often making difficult choices as to whether to pay for electricity and food or to keep a roof over their heads. This is an incredibly stressful situation for people to find themselves in, whether it is single individuals or families struggling with the rising costs of living, or older people relying on government support and trying to make ends meet." So the community fund is established. It will have 3 sources of income. The first is we were able to negotiate very below commercial lease rates with the landholders whose land we're going to be putting the solar farm on. That is the Divals and the Australian Rail Track Corporation. Secondly, the rules of the cooperative state that up to 20% of profits can be donated to charity, and it is the members of the co-op who will actually make that decision. So this is as democratic and community as it gets. And thirdly, shareholders may choose to, at the time of dividends, donate some or indeed all in a tax deductible manner to the fund.
Thanks, Ed. It's a terrific opportunity for people to invest, to have an ethical and financial return on their investment, and to help with our community fund, which will help disadvantaged people in our community. What I'm going to do now is to introduce Jonathan Prendergast. He's from Como Energy, and he's going to talk about some of the technical issues to do with the solar farm. And just reminding you that if you've got questions as we go, you can type them in on the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to answer those in the Q&A at the end. So I'll introduce you to Jonathan. Jonathan has had extensive experience in the renewable energy for a long number of years, both internationally and in Australia. He's also had experience working at the University of Technology. He's one of the directors of Como Energy, and they're the people who are developing the farm from our instructions, really. So, Jonathan, take it away and tell us a bit about the technical issues involved with the farm.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, I am Jonathan Prendergast from Como Energy. Thank you for tuning in tonight and your interest in the project. It's great to have you on board. We think that this is an important project as an investment in local energy generation in Goulburn and seeing the community lead in making clean energy generation happen. Our role is to ensure the investment is secure on a technical and contractual basis. This includes gaining all approvals necessary for construction, the construction and operations and maintenance contracts, tightly in place to ensure a high quality and timely delivery of the project, and to make sure that the project output and revenues meet expectations over time. The solar farm will earn revenues in three ways. Firstly, selling solar power into the New South Wales grid, physically using the local grid but into the New South Wales market. Also selling renewable energy certificates. And finally, using the battery to provide grid services, such as meeting peak demand. The project will include 1.2 megawatts of solar capacity, which is around 3,000 panels. We'll also include the mounting system that holds the panels piled into the ground. It will also include the electrical grid connection, including transformers, wiring, and other infrastructure. And finally, the 800 kilowatt hour battery. As Peter mentioned, the project will provide clean electricity generation to meet demand, both locally and statewide. And sometimes demand is higher, like in the evenings. And at these times, the price goes up for electricity in the wholesale market. The addition of the battery will mean it can store around 20% of the daily solar generation and reserve that energy to meet that peak demand and receive higher revenues. Over time, we believe the battery will provide a more steady revenue stream to the project by tapping into those higher price periods when demand is high. I'll be around for the Q&A section, so if there are any technical queries, please stick around and ask them during that time, and I'll be happy to answer to them then. Back to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. If you've got any more questions of a technical nature, please put them in the chat, and Jonathan will try and answer them at the end of the session here. Next, I want to hand over to Gretchen Alt-Cooper, who is the Treasurer of CE4G. So she'll go over some of the financial issues involved in investing in the co-op. Gretchen's had extensive experience in the financial sector and currently runs her own superannuation consultancy firm. So, Gretchen, you can talk about some of the issues with the financial investment side of things.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome everyone to our webinar. One of the first questions everyone asks is, why did we establish a cooperative? Well, it's because it's the most democratic form of governance. It means that there's one person and one vote. The number of shares that you hold doesn't influence how many votes you have. Very much it's becoming apparent that cooperatives are the way of the future for community projects. They're very well used overseas for such things and becoming increasingly so here in Australia. How much are we aiming to raise? Well, the total build is 4.2 million. New South Wales Department of Primary Industries and Environment has given us a grant of 2.1 million to allow us to get this up and running and get a battery on it. So we need to raise approximately $2 million after taking into account our voluntary work. What return on investment can you expect? Well, we can't promise a specific rate of return. We don't know how much we'll get for the electricity we generate, but it will be a commercial rate of return. We're aiming for around 5% fully franked, which in this current investment environment is pretty good. What risks are there? Well, the risks are laid out in the disclosure statement, which you should read thoroughly, and you can find it on our website. That's goulburnsolarfarm.com.au. So what does being a member involve? You've got to be an active member. That is, each year you must participate in at least one event or meeting or working bee, and you must subscribe to our email newsletter. It's not terribly onerous. You must pay a joining fee of $10. You must pay an annual fee of $10, and you must purchase at least 400 shares, which is about the cost of a panel. Minimum shareholding is 400 shares. The maximum, and this is regulated by the Department of Fair Trading, is 400,000 shares, 20% of the issued capital. Can you own shares in a name other than your own? Well, yes. You can own shares through your super fund, your family trust, your company. You can own them jointly with someone else, or you can own them on behalf of minors, and those shares will then go to those children or grandchildren when they attain majority. So how do you join? You come to the website, download the member application form, pay us the joining fee of $10 and annual fee of $10. Once we've approved your membership, you will receive the investor application form, and you can return it to us either with a cheque for your investment or details of your bank transfer. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Gretchen. That wraps up the formal part of the meeting. So to become a member, you must invest a minimum of $400 and you must be approved by the board, and that's something required in the legislation. So what I'm going to do now is just hand it over to Ed again, and he'll just go through what you need to do if you want to invest.
Hello again, everyone. When we started this 4 or 5 years ago, and Peter just asked me now to sort of wrap things up to some extent, I really wondered, what can I say that's not already been said? And then I thought of the pride with which we have put into this, and tonight we're at the stage where we can go to the community and ask for up to $2 million for people to own part of this solar farm themselves. Now, I don't think there are many investments of which, try to put this in a nice way, of which you might be really proud. For instance, I suspect that if you owned Rio Tinto shares, you might not talk about it too loudly in the pub or over a cup of coffee, or you may even have sold them by now. You can be totally proud in the investment that we're offering to you tonight. You can put some of your own money into a 100% clean energy project that will supply about 450 homes not using power from dirty coal-fired power stations. You will have pride in the fact that this is the largest community-owned solar farm in New South Wales. You can have further pride in knowing that it'll be Australia's first community-owned solar farm with a battery backup, maximising revenue and profit. You can have even more pride in knowing that the profits stay within the community, thus supporting the local economy. You can have even more pride in the fact that the co-op members and shareholders, who are the same group of people, actually control their own destiny. They are the ones who decide the dividend level. They are the ones who decide how much money goes into that sinking fund. They are the ones who decide what to donate to the community fund. So you can invest as little as $400 and be able to drive past the site or be on a train chuffing past it and look with pride and nudge the people around you and point out of the window and say, I own some of that. And what the final great thing about this is the financial benefits not only flow to those who can afford to buy the shares, but it also flows to those within the community who are really struggling, and to those who in our community could never even dream of owning a part of anything. So this is truly a community-owned and for community solar farm. So the offer is open now. It will remain open to people within the Goulburn region until November the 20th. If we have not raised the $2 million by then we will make the offer available to New South Wales and the ACT. And I can tell you there's a fair amount of pent-up demand. Last week at our first meeting we raised over $500,000. We need to raise a further 1.5 million, so we've got a way to go, but now is your opportunity. So you need to go to the website goulburnsolarfarm.com.au,
Go to the financials page, and at the bottom of that is the instruction how to invest. Click on that and away you go. We really look forward to welcoming you as part of this.
Thanks, Ed. It's fantastic. It's been a fantastic result so far, and yes, we've got further to go, and we'll get there, and we're really confident of that. In 1 week, having raised $500,000, we feel very confident. So what we'll do now is we've got a number of questions that have come in, and there's actually been a couple of questions that have been sent to us in the mail, funnily enough. So I actually get to start off with one of those, and that was a question that was sent to us saying, how can I sell my shares? And so I'll hand that over to Gretchen, who will answer that question. How can I sell my shares?
Thanks, Peter. What we'll be doing is running like a matchmaking service. You won't be able to sell your shares immediately. You won't be able to say, I want to sell my shares today and have the money tomorrow. But what we will be doing is maintaining a register of people who want to buy shares or want to increase their shareholding, and we'll match you up with those people so that the shares can be exchanged and money can be exchanged. Similarly, if you die, we'll be running a matchmaking service to find someone to purchase your shares.
Thanks, Gretchen. There's a couple of questions about people who want to invest from outside the LGA. So at the moment, our priority is to have people within the Goulburn region, that includes the surrounding LGAs, to be able to invest up until November the 20th. After the November the 20th, we're opening it up to ACT and New South Wales investors and then Australian investors. So if you are outside the region, and that includes the surrounding LGAs from apart from the Goulburn Mulwari LGA, the best thing to do is to get in the queue, and the way to get in the queue is to send us an application form and make sure we know your postcode so that we can then put you in the queue, so that as soon as November the 20th comes, and if we haven't raised a sufficient amount of money, then we will be offering shares to those people in order in which we received their application. So get in quick. So there's a couple of questions about batteries, and I'll ask Jonathan to answer those. So the first question is, what type of battery will be used? And then the second question is, with the battery at full capacity, how much electricity could you download during peak hour at maximum electricity prices? So I'll ask Jonathan to answer that question.
Thanks, Peter. Just got my spreadsheet going while that comes through. But in terms of what type of battery it is, it will be a lithium-ion battery. We think the project is innovative enough in terms of its being a community investment using a co-op and being at this scale that we don't wish to add another layer of complexity by choosing a more novel battery. Lithium-ion is relatively new at grid storage in the last 3 to 5 years, but is already a mature technology and proven technology. So the plan is to use a lithium-ion battery, 800 kilowatt hours. Similar types out there are Tesla and LG Chem and many other battery suppliers now supplying lithium-ion batteries. It's chosen because it's a proven technology doing this sort of application. Its ability to very easily integrate to the solar project and the electrical infrastructure, that being the grid connection. So they're the main reasons behind using a lithium-ion battery. It's very responsive, easy to control and optimize. So if it were to totally discharge during a peak pricing event, that would be 800 kilowatt hours or 0.8 of a megawatt hour, or around 20% of the daily production of the solar farm, exporting at, say, $15,000 per megawatt hour. That would earn $12,000 if it fully discharged at those peak rates. and that's just for say 1 day. Obviously, that doesn't happen every day. It's quite rare. But if we were to do that, it would earn $4 million a year doing that if it happened every day. Just to give you an idea of the scale, that's likely to happen only 2 to 6 times a year. But that's the sort of revenue it can receive if we see those peak pricing events in the wholesale market. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Jonathan. Look, there was a structural question that someone asked today when they came and met one of us, and that was simply, what's the difference between CE4G and the co-op? And the explanation's simple. CE4G, that's Community Energy for Goulburn, they're the group that have basically been running this whole project since its inception, but CE4G has other projects in mind and has already started planning for two more projects that will run after we've got this one off the ground. The co-op has been formed specifically to run this particular project. That's the solar farm. So people who invest in the co-op will be investing in the solar farm. In the future, the co-op might make some other decisions. We don't know, because that's up to the members of the co-op. But CE4G will definitely be running at least another 2 projects after this one down the line a bit. So there's another question here, and that is, I'll ask Gretchen to answer this one. What happens if you are unable to raise the $2 million of capital still required? And another person's asked, what happens if you raise more than the $2 million still required? So Gretchen can answer both those questions. What happens if we fail to get there, and what happens if we get too much money? So I'll hand it over to Gretchen.
Thank you, Peter. Firstly, if we are unable to raise the $2 million, our construction partners, Como, have undertaken to underwrite the project to at least 25%. So we'd need to raise $1.5 million. In the event that we're unable to raise it from the community, we'll go to financial institutions to and passive investors to raise the balance. The second question was, what happens if we are oversubscribed? We'll return the money to the people who get in last. First in, best dressed. If you get in early, you're in the project. If you wait till the end and we've already raised the money, your money will be returned to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gretchen. This is a question for Jonathan, and it's to do with the solar radiation, amount of solar radiation that comes into this area, and the questioner is asked, is climatology data available for distribution, and what does it show in terms of annual income scenarios? So it's really a question of how much sun is. I think it's a question of how much sun is shining and have we taken that into account in the business case model. So Jonathan, can you have a go at that one?
Yes, we've certainly used the local BOM data to estimate the possible production by the solar farm. In terms of providing that model, I'll have to take that on notice and send it through to the team.
Thanks, Jonathan. Here's another go from Jeffrey. He says, further to my previous question, how long would it take to download 800 kilowatt hours to the grid?
Certainly, the battery will have a 400 kilowatt capacity for both charging and discharging. So 800 kilowatt hours would take 2 hours.
Thanks. So Kate has also said that she's having trouble finding the investment application form. So Kate, the deal is you fill in the membership application form, you send that to us, and once you're approved, and we have to approve everybody because it's part of the fair trading regulations that everybody that applies to become a member has to be approved by the board. Once you're approved, which only takes 24 hours normally, we then send you the application for investment form, which is a different form, and that's where you have to disclose to us, more details than just becoming a member. So you have to give us your bank details. We have to have your tax file number, and there's various other bits and pieces that we're required to collect from you when you invest. So the first thing is you fill in the membership form. Once you're approved, we then send you the investment application form, and that's when you fill in and you fill in your details, and then you invest the money then after you've received that investment application form. Another question is there any direct financial risk to shareholders that might refer liability onto shareholders and jeopardise individuals? I guess Gretchen should really answer that one. So I'll let her talk about shareholders and liabilities.
Thanks, Peter. There's no real liability for shareholders other than making sure you pay your annual fee and remain an active member. There are risks that are outlined in the disclosure statement, which you can download from our website. But there's no real ongoing liability for shareholders. We don't require you to do anything.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit more to that, there's risks in investing in anything. So if you invest in shares in BHP and China decides they don't want any more coal or iron ore, there's a risk, and the share price might drop, and then you'll lose some of your investment. The good thing about this solar farm is once it's built, it generates electricity, and it does it for 25 to 30 years, and we get paid for generating that electricity, and then we sell it. And that's how we make our money. The only costs that we've got in running the solar farm are very minor. We've got to pay for some lease on the land. We've got to pay for some maintenance costs. We've got to pay things like insurance. There's a small number of costs. So that graph I showed earlier on showed that taking into account in a conservative way how much money we think the electricity will be sold for over those 10 years. And we've looked at the historical figures, we've looked at the projections into the future, we've looked at a whole lot of different scenarios in regards to the amount of revenue that we can expect. We definitely know our cost structure, and that will remain reasonably stable over the whole period. So once you know the revenue and then you know the cost structure, you can see how much profit you're making. And that graph, which is up there again, looks at, let's say we pay a 5% dividend. So 5% of $2 million is 100,000. So that green line along the bottom is the 5% return on investment that we would pay to all investors. Assuming that we're going to get the kind of prices we think we will for electricity, and we've done a lot of work on that to predict what we think those prices will be, assuming the cost structure, and we're very sure about the cost structure because we've got contracts with the people that are going to be paying this, that we're going to be paying, I should say. So if you assume the revenue, you assume the cost structure, you assume 5% return on investment, what that produces is a $850,000 cash reserve at the end of 10 years. That cash reserve at the end of 10 years can, if the members of the co-op decide, they could replace all the panels for that amount of money and start again. So even though the panels are guaranteed to perform for 20 years, if we wanted to, we could replace them after 10 years. And we may even be able to put more panels on there simply because the price of panels is continuing to come down. So when we talk about risk, if you go and Google, are there risks in solar, you'll get a bit of an idea of what the market is saying, which is it's an incredibly secure, safe investment. We can't guarantee it. We can't say things are going to change, just like we didn't know about the COVID virus. We didn't know what that was going to do to the economy. But taking all that into account and doing conservative projections and building a business model which the New South Wales government was comfortable with, we're comfortable with what we're projecting in terms of return on investment, and we're comfortable in terms of what we think the cash reserves will be after 10 years. No guarantees, but as good as we can get. I think that's the best way I can answer that. I'm just looking at some more questions here. Okay, I have filled out the application form, but there's no information on how to pay the fees. Can I pay by bank transfer? And if so, where do I find the account details? I'll hand that over to Gretchen.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. I understood the bank details were on the member application form. I'm sorry, I don't have that specific information right available now. If you email us that question at hello@goulburnsolarfarm.com.au, we'll send you the details.
Thanks, Gretchen. What's the expected life of the panels? 20 years, battery? Jonathan, can you answer that question? What's the expected life of the panels and what's the expected life of the battery? And what happens to the co-op at that time? So I think I've answered about the co-op, but perhaps you can answer the questions about the expected life and the performance of the battery and the panels.
Certainly, thanks, Peter. In terms of the expected life of the panels, we expect them to last 25 to 30 years or longer. They do degrade over time, so by 25 years you would expect a 20% or around there drop in production by that time. For the battery storage system, it's also very much a function of degradation over time. If you cycle the battery, that is totally discharge it and totally charge it every day, you would expect 10 to 20% degradation by year 10. And that means it will have 10 to 20% less capacity to store energy by that time. What you can do at that moment is choose to use the battery less so it doesn't degrade as quickly. And that might be reserving that storage capacity for higher price days and moments rather than discharging it and supplying into the grid every day. Over time, you could choose to add more batteries or replace the batteries as well. And I presume the co-op can make decisions as a group at year 10, year 20, year 30, whether to upgrade, extend the life or other decisions like that.
Thanks, Jonathan. Rita's asked, seems that the membership application form is not editable online. Yes, we have been having trouble with that, Rita. Hopefully by tomorrow it'll be up there and editable, but at the moment we are having a bit of trouble with that. So the best we can say to you is if you can print it off, sign it, scan it, that's probably the best way tonight, but tomorrow hopefully it'll be editable. So that's the best I can say on that one. Another question from Kathy, are there provisions for people with physical impairment to become and remain active members? So Gretchen should answer that.
As someone with a physical impairment, I can attest that that is so. You pay your annual fee, you pay your joining fee, you attend at least one meeting, and it could be an online meeting, and you subscribe to the newsletter. That's what's required to be an annual an active member.
Great. Thanks, Gretchen. I think that's really all the questions that we've got up there. So I think we've tried to answer all of those questions. If you have more questions, just go to email at hello@goulburnsolarfarm.com.au and we'll answer those in the next day. So I think that's the best way forward from now. If we've run out of questions and answers, so if you've got more, just email us and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So just reiterating, go to our website, go to the financials page, go down to the bottom of the page where it says how to invest and fill in the membership form, the application form, and we will get you the investment application form as soon as you're approved. So all that's left to say is thank you for your attendance. It's been really encouraging how things are going in the whole process. We've had a really good attendance at the last public meeting last week. We've had a really good attendance at this webinar, and we've got another public meeting next week with people have signed up for that already. So if you want to come to actual physical meeting, come along next Wednesday night at the Workers Club. So thank you very much for attending, and we'll close off now. Thank you.